The Fenian Knights, a legend of the West. There is a fort near the Killeries in the Connemara called Lisnia Kiran. One day, the powerful chief that lived there invited the great Fian Makul with his son Oscar and a band of Fenian knights to a great banquet. But when the guests arrived, they found no chairs prepared for them, only rough benches of wood placed round the table. So, Oscar and his father would take no place, but stood watching, for they suspected treachery. The knights, however, fearing nothing, sat down to the feast, but were instantly fixed to the benches so firmly by magic that they could neither rise nor move. Then Fian began to chew his thumb, from which he always derived knowledge of the future, and by his magic power he saw clearly a great and terrible warrior riding fiercely towards the fort. And Fian knew that unless he could be stopped before crossing a certain ford, they must all die. For they have been brought to Lisna Kiran, only to be slain by their treacherous host. And unless the warrior was killed, and his blood sprinkled on the Fenian knights, they must remain fixed on the wooden benches forever. So, Oscar of the Lion Heart rushed forth to the encounter, and he flung his spear at the mighty horsemen, and they fought desperately till the setting of the sun. Then, at last, Oscar triumphed. Victory was his, and he cut off the head of his adversary and carried it on his spear, all bleeding, to the fort, where he let the blood drop down upon the Fenian knights that were transfixed by magic. On this, they at once sprang up free and scatheless, all except one, for on him, unhappily, no blood had fallen, and so he remained fixed to his bench. His companions tried to drag him up by main force, but as they did so, the skin of his thighs was left on the bench, and he was like to die. Then they killed a sheep and wrapped the fleece around him, warm from the animal, to heal him. So he was cured. But ever after, strange to relate, 7 stone of wool were annually shorn from his body as long as he lived. The manner in which Fion learned the mystery of obtaining wisdom from his thumb was in this wise. It happened one time when he was quite a youth, that he was taken prisoner by a one-eyed giant, who at first was going to kill him, but then he changed his mind and sent him to the kitchen to mind the dinner. Now there was a great and splendid salmon broiling on the fire, and the giant said, "Watch that salmon till it is done, but if a single blister rise on the skin, you shall be killed." Then the giant threw himself down to sleep while waiting for the dinner. So Fion watched the salmon with all his eyes, but to his horror, he saw a blister rising on the beautiful silver skin of the fish, and in his fright and eagerness, he pressed his thumb down on it to flatten it. Then the pain of the burn being great, he clapped the thumb into his mouth and kept it there to suck out the fire. When he drew it back, however, he found to his surprise that he had a knowledge of all that was going to happen to him, and a clear sense of what he ought to do. and it came into his mind that if he put the giant's eye with an iron rod heated in the fire, he could escape from the monster. So he heated the rod, and while the giant slept, he plunged it into his eye. And before the horrid being recovered from the shock, Fenian escaped and was soon back safe amongst his own people, the Fenian Knights. And ever after, in moments of great peril and doubt, when he put his thumb into his mouth and sucked it, the vision of the future came on him, and he could foresee clearly whatever danger lay in his path and how to avoid it. But it was only in such extreme moments of peril that the mystic power was granted to him, and thus he was unable to save his own life and the lives of his chosen Fenian guard. When all hope seemed well nigh gone,